I don't even know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
So we'll figure it out.
No, I think the
You can't talk to me about movies you haven't seen. I'm going to say.
Well,
that.
let's talk about No, I haven't watched it yet. Chapter and verse is going to be the next one.
Chapter and verse is something you need to see. I mean, it's interesting because it's a low-budget, independent feature, and it was made non-union, which is not the way I normally work. I've worked, major movies on my whole career, but it's a movie that I think you ought to see because I'm proud of it. I think it's a very good movie, but it's also the whole concept of how we put it together is pretty much different than most of the other things that I've done. So we will definitely talk about it.
You all
get to see it first.
I will, and you all heard it. Hold me accountable, and I'll make sure that I watch that movie.
Now everybody knows you have to do it.
I have to do it. The very next one's going to be chapter and verse. I thought, it's short films that have been coming up a lot lately.
Yeah.
Just in my life, and what's funny about short films is I actually realized that they have a huge part in my career, and I never really looked at it that way. Because short films, traditionally, when a regular kind of filmmaker thinks about it, it's some artsy thing with a black and white, some girl smoking a cigarette, eating a pancake on a French countertop, and then it's over. Theme. Yeah. And but short films can be a lot of different things. I mean, the format's really kind of unregulated in that sense, right? As long as it's under, in certain festivals, 40 minutes or under 60 or whatever. Yeah. It can mean whatever it means.
Well, I'll give you an example. The length of them is somehow, a lot of it is determined by the Motion Picture Academy. If you want to be considered in the Motion Picture Academy for Best Live Action Short, you have to be under 30 minutes.
Under 30?
Under 30. And that includes your credits, everything. The whole thing has to be under 30 minutes. If it's over 30 minutes, it's not considered a short by them.
What's it considered? That's not a feature.
Well, it could be. Huh. You could make a feature that's an hour long. I mean, okay. I mean, the documentaries tend to be more like an hour.
I have a documentary feature. It's exactly an hour. Okay. Yeah. Well, but
I mean, it's interesting about the length of movies too. Used to be determined a lot by the actual film magazines. You wouldn't believe this, but if you wanted not even that many years ago when everyone was using film, for example, take an IMAX movie. The IMAX movies had to fit on one big reel, and that the largest reel you could get for that kind of film was 1 hour.
Is that because you can't swap an IMAX projector the same way you can a regular one?
No. They're huge. I mean, the reels are so
I've never seen one.
Big. Oh, yeah, you got to see it. They run flat, and they run so that the reel is not like this. The reel is lying on a table, and it's flat, and it goes around and around. But you can't have more than an hour. So initially, IMAX was mainly used for kind of documentary-type movies, not dramatic movies, because the length was pretty much prescribed by the size of the theater. You couldn't make them. There is no changeover. The projections would have had to be 2 buildings wide. So
is that 70 millimeter film then?
It's actually bigger than 70 millimeter film. It's the actual frame size, 15 perf, I think it is. No, it's 8 perfs. Well, since it runs sideways.
That's what I was going to ask next.
It runs sideways because the picture has to be wider than it's on a 70 millimeter piece of film running sideways.
So the image doesn't get flipped. It actually runs. It's printed sideways.
Yeah. And therefore, the image looks like a postcard. Every frame is about the size of a regular postcard. That's a pretty big piece of film.
Yeah.
When you think that the normal frame size is
so IMAX is up to an hour, you said? One reel was?
That's not the case anymore.
Well, it's digital
now. We went digital.
Right.
So you can be any.
But then it used to be that. So that was considered a feature because it was still...
It was an hour, but that was it. It couldn't be longer than an hour. And it was... they changed all of that. Once we went from, actual film to digital, it opened up the possibility of longer films being able to be run. I mean, you could run a longer film on IMAX, but there'd be a big
You'd have an
gap
intermission,
of time.
right?
Because I mean, the projectors weren't made to be run, one after another.
Remember there used to be intermissions?
Oh, sure.
I haven't thought of that in forever, but I don't.
I mean, intermissions in film were rare, and they were only in very, very long.
Fiddler on the Roof had one.
Yeah,
Right.
Fiddler on the Roof had it. Around the World in 80 Days, when it was originally done.
Because
they
long.
used to have intermissions because nobody could sit in a seat that long. People had to go to the bathroom. I mean, it was that kind of thing. But it kind of breaks up the experience.
It does.
And you really have to, when you're doing it, think about it from an editing standpoint. You want to have the break happen at a moment that's going to make you want to come back and see the second half.
Right.
And it's more like an experience in a theater on Broadway. The funny thing is, on Broadway, you've always had intermissions, and there's usually an intermission comes is usually at a part of the show where you leave something unresolved, so that when you come back, you're really going to care about
Smart.
it. Well, it was the same thing. You had to try to find that in the movie to make that work. But and the funny thing about it is, everything has gotten shorter in a way, in the sense, I'm not to say that, sure, there are long pictures like Scorsese and Killers of the Flower Moon and stuff like that. That's two almost 3 hours long, and that's a hard. First of all, for theaters, it takes up. You can have less showings a day,
Right.
And that's a critical aspect of the economics of theater. So you want to have. I mean, over 2 hours is really hard. If you do it over 2 hours, there has to be a really good reason for it, or you have to be Marty Scorsese, who has the power to be able to make that happen. But there aren't, big extra long films like that. It's very hard to get people to want to make, because you're going to lose a showing almost every day, at least one, maybe two. And so that's going to be 2 less audiences a day that you're getting paid for.
Well, that makes sense, because after 90 minutes and now you do 2 hours, that 3 times you screen it, that's the entire thing over again.
That's it.
It's a 90-minute film.
Well, think about it. In theaters now in New York, and the new thing now is doing a show that has no intermission, and that's only 90 minutes maximum. So the whole show, physical theater, is 90 minutes, and people like that because they get home earlier. It's an easier
I
experience.
gotta say, I kind of like that too. I sitting for a long time. It's for me. It's not that I don't have the attention span. I have things to do. And I like, when you have a lot of kids and you run a business and stuff, I like to be efficient with my time.
I get it.
But that doesn't mean I like to, get in and escape. But, 90 minutes is a good length.
Well, I mean, you got to remember all of these things have been evolving so that you can have, there were always 90-minute movies. Every one of Woody Allen's movies is probably not more than 90 minutes. Yeah. Most comedies are not usually more than 90 to 100 minutes at maximum. For 2 hours are usually dramas, longer than 2 hours. And now, if you want to tell a story that's going to be 3 hours long, you make a miniseries and you do it.
Exactly.
And you don't show it in the theater, but you show it on a streamer, or you show it on a television network, and you show it in a way that has act breaks that allow you to show something that's 5 hours long, 6 hours long, whatever it may be.
6 1-hour episodes. Yeah. So that actually goes nicely back into the shorts.
Yes.
And the question there is, and this is what filmmakers always struggle with. Now, I have my own ways of monetizing shorts as a service, or doing them for branded content, being paid by clients to do them, or having So we've had somewhat different successes with shorts. You have 3 Academy Awards for them. I have viral views and business endeavors that finance a good part of my life, leveraging short film production and stuff. And they really come in a lot of different formats. So why don't we maybe start talking a little bit about, for maybe there's a filmmaker out there, or maybe there's just people who enjoy shorts.
Let me go into how I got involved in the short film world, because I wound up, I ran a company, I developed a company actually called Chanticleer Films. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And I had a partner, a woman named Jana Sue Memel, and Jana was my creative partner in the business. We ran the business, and it was a real business. And the way it happened, so you understand why it happened, was the fact that I would take a project to a major studio, and that it was written by an individual who wanted to direct it. And it was an independently written project, so it was usually a spec script. You understand what that is? So
Well, for the audience, that's a script that's written by the writer that hasn't gotten financed or anything yet, but they wrote it to show what they can do and are hoping that somebody's going to finance it and make the movie.
Exactly. So that was the issue. So I would take a project to a studio because I thought it was really good, and I might have had a deal with the studio, and they wanted to support projects that I brought in, and I'd bring it in, and I'd say, yeah, this is the project, but the guy who wrote it wants to direct it. And they'd say, we love the script, but
we don't know if that guy can.
We don't know if that girl can direct, and we don't want to take the risk.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, why? I mean, I couldn't understand why they were so resistant, although I understood that their interest was always in using the tried and true, somebody who's already done it before, as opposed to somebody who was brand new at it. So I thought, how am I going to convince these people to use people that I want to bring in to direct these scripts? Because I knew that very often the writer who wanted to direct was not going to allow the script. They weren't going to sell the script. They weren't going to go sell it to somebody else and let them direct it. If they had their heart set on directing it, how do we make that happen? So I realized, okay, well, what if we showed you a piece of film that individual directed? You know, if it was somebody who'd made a short.
Yeah.
So the short idea came up as a selling tool for the director. It was something that you could bring to the studio, show it to them, and let them take a look at it and see if they recognize, okay, this is somebody who can direct. You can see it. It's in they're working with real actors. They pick real good camera positions. They've done all this work, and they would, I felt that would be an easier way to win that argument when they said, well, we don't want this person because they never directed anything. So that was the beginning of it. I had a deal at Warner Brothers to develop projects, but they didn't have to make them. It was just an overall deal. And I was trying to get stuff done, and it was not easy. And the head of the studio at the time was David Putnam. David Putnam came in, and he was the head of the studio for a brief period of time. And David Putnam was unusual as a studio head because he was a producer of major movies in England. He didn't come to being a studio executive from being an agent or a lawyer. Yeah. He was a real filmmaker, and which of course also made for the fact that he didn't last very long because
he wasn't thinking so much about the economics, maybe as much as good films.
He wasn't thinking of the economics, and he didn't bow and scrape to the fat cats who were paying him.
Yeah.
He just wanted to make good stuff.
Yeah.
In any event, he supported my desire, and I said, look, I want to do shorts, and the idea is to do these a bunch of short films with new directors and to give them a shot so that then they can go on to make features. I mean, the idea wasn't to do shorts.
Just to interject real quick, for all of the, I tell this to actors and filmmakers all the time. You need to go out and make your own short and put it in festivals or something like that. And this is just evidence that this idea is not new. This is
the idea isn't new, but the difference is, there's a big difference as to how it was back in the 80s and 90s as to how it is now. At that time, to make a short, you needed big cameras, and you needed real film, and you needed all of this, and
they needed a guy like you to do it. You couldn't just go do that.
You couldn't just make it on your iPhone. You had to figure it out, and it was expensive. I mean, film was expensive, processing was expensive, editing was expensive. All of those things were expensive. And when we started the Discovery program, Jana and I, we were not interested in basically in film students, because film students already had a way to make films at their film schools. We wanted to bring people into the industry as directors who had been editors, who had been cameramen, who had been, or actors, anything, some other field.
With
But somebody who was
experience, who wanted to.
they already had some experience.
That's worth noting that in this industry, you really kind of get known for what you're introduced as. And so when you work with somebody and you're a first AD, it's really hard for anybody that's worked with you to see you as anything other than that.
That's very true. No, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
So this was an idea to get people who had the skills and who could bring a piece of material and make it happen in a short format, which wouldn't be that costly. And essentially, that was our plan. Our plan was to really get that to happen. And
now, how did some of these end up going on to win Academy Awards?
well, here's the thing: we pitched the idea of doing shorts to David Putnam. I'm sorry, I said Warner's. He was at Columbia Pictures. That's where he was, and he was the head of Columbia Pictures, and he recognized the value of it. So he said, "Okay, we'll finance 5 shorts a year. We'll own them, and you make them, and you pick them. You figure out the way to pick the right people to do them, and we'll finance them, and then that will be an opportunity for us to take a look at some of these new directors." And it was an opportunity. And it wasn't just writers. As I said, it was editors, it was camera, it was all kinds of people in the business who wanted to direct.
You mentioned spec scripts earlier. Now, were they always based on bigger scripts that these people wanted to make, or was some of them?
No, in fact, we didn't make it a requirement even that the person who submitted the script had to have written it. We said, look, if you have a piece for a short film and you can get the rights to it, you bring it to us and we'll make it. And we got 500 scripts. I mean, it was
did you select scripts based on the concepts being scalable into feature-length films, or
No,
it was
once again, we didn't do that. We decided that we wanted to make short films that were uniquely complete in and of themselves. We weren't looking to make a scene of a larger film. That was not our plan. We didn't. I mean, maybe if we'd been smarter, we would have done that, but we didn't. We just said, no, we want to, bring in a story that we can make in a short format and it could be anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. It had to be under. I mean, the final result we knew had to be under 30 minutes, and we chose that because the Academy had a rule saying it had to be 30 minutes. So we wanted to be able to at least qualify for that.
So was it like hey, here we got these great films we've made, now what do we do with them? Or did you always know that you were just going to kind of make them and submit them to the Academy and festival?
We had no way of taking them and monetizing them. That was not really the plan. The plan was really to create a format and a forum, actually, to let these films get out there and show them in festivals. We showed initially, for the first, I think, 4 years of the program, we had a deal with Sundance that all of our shorts would screen at Sundance. And we screened them every year at Sundance. We had like 5 shorts a year. They would have a special program. They show all of our Discovery shorts.
Great.
That was great.
So it's really, it was a catalyst for people.
People got them to be seen, but we never thought of them going into theaters.
And it was it because Sundance is an Academy qualifying festival that they ended up there, or how did that?
No, it was just that Sundance was a cool festival, and we knew it was a cool festival, and they took us, and it was early.
So you submitted to the Academy for consideration separately.
Separately, everything was submitted. Well, what we did was once we made the shorts, there was a list of festivals that we knew about, and if the individual filmmaker, we didn't have the money to support the of taking the film to every festival. But if the individual filmmaker wanted to put his film in the Chicago Film Festival or the Toronto Film Festival or the New York Film Festival, we would see that happened.
Aren't the requirements for an Academy submission that it somehow was theatrically released?
Yes, there was. That was a requirement, and the way that everybody dealt with that requirement, be it and probably still does, was that it had to be shown in a theater for 1 week. Okay, so we went to the theater chains and we said, we'll give you the films if you will run them for a week. And they did. I mean, they would run them either before a film or they'd run them as a group. But we could get them to do that. We'd go to AMC or to Regal or one of those companies and say, look, we're going to give you this stuff. You can, and all you do, and they only had to, but remember, they only had to show it one time a day for 5 days.
In one theater?
In one theater. They could show it at 2 a.m. if they wanted.
But you're reminding me of something else now, a time where the word feature presentation, there were often short films playing before, and they're called features because it was the main event.
Yeah.
And so you would play a bunch of short films or music
Sometimes
or something.
you would, yeah. I mean, it got to, by the time we came into business, most of that world had ended. I mean, nobody was showing short.
Pixar, maybe. Yeah, Pixar would do their own little.
But Pixar didn't even exist. This is way.
This was after.
Pixar.
Yeah.
We're way before Pixar.
Yeah.
So this is before, and there's nothing. There's really there's not much of an opportunity. They're not going to pay you anything.
But the Academy had a category for shorts, even though it wasn't really a big thing.
Yeah, they had a category for shorts, and it looked like it was going to dry up. I'm talking in the late 80s, there weren't, the shorts came from the Canadian Film Board. They came from Europe, in London and other places. There were many more shorts made. In the US, shorts were not, there was no organized way to make shorts at all. Everything they came out of film schools, they came out of other places, but there was nothing organized. We were a program that came in and we literally filled a void. There weren't many people doing what we did. And I like to think that we were responsible for a resurgence in interest in the short film because we made a lot of them. We made, over the 5 years that I was doing this, and actually it went on even more than that. I kind of realized that I couldn't make any money making short films, but I enjoyed the process creatively. It was a lot of fun. I had to get out and go back to producing major movies.
But you built some really cool relationships, and also there were some really cool people in some of these shorts. You have one with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Before anybody knew him. Right?
Nope. Yeah, I mean, very, very few. No, I don't even think he had done. No, he may have done Thelma and Louise, which was really the breakout film for Brad Pitt. But it was just around that time. It was very early in his career. We had a lot of very good people in these shorts that are known now in the business. We got the Screen Actors Guild let us use their actors kind of on a waiver. We didn't. I mean, as I remember, we didn't have to pay them anything. I mean, it was a 5-day thing, and if we paid them the least amount of money we could possibly pay them. Same thing with our crews. Our crews were not paid huge amounts of money, but
these are great opportunities.
We gave a lot of people opportunities.
Oh, that was the whole point of the program, was to give people an opportunity.
The program originally was our original thought was bringing people up and making, having them become directors. What we realized, though, was that we wanted to have really good, high quality tech people also. So we would go to a top camera operator who wanted to be a director of photography, and we'd say, okay, here, we'll give you a short. You can be the DP on the short. You can be the director of photography on this short, and you'll have it as a calling card. You can show it to people, show your work, and that might get you a feature. We did the same thing with like an assistant art director who wanted to be a production designer.
Yeah.
We let them do it, so that we brought in very, very good people who were on their way up in every category. We didn't initially plan that, but that's kind of how it worked out.
It's a similar thing because I ran a kind of a business, a side hustle, or it was scaled to pretty good numbers, but we produced shorts for actors, right? And because that for those who don't know, if you're an actor and you're trying to break into the industry, the first thing you'll be asked, okay, well, show me something. Yeah. And, you can't just go record yourself on a cell phone and expect that the casting director of Game of Thrones is going to put you in the top billed cast there based on that, right? So you better have something a little more directed, produced, lit, like that makes people also understand that you've at least been on a set and have some experience. And those things initially started out as, I was being asked by actors I knew just, if I could shoot something for them. But then it turned into something where I said, this is a pretty good little business I could run here. And, as a filmmaker, you just kind of feast or famine, right? You're either making movies or you're figuring out where to pull another dollar from. So I kind of started doing it consistently, and then I started realizing that I'm really cultivating a group of people, an ever-growing group of people of, I get to test out new writers. I get to try out new DPs. I get to try out editors. I get to find talent, actors, things like that. And, some are better than others, but you can test ideas or concepts that you have that you might want to, make bigger things from. And you don't have to.
The unintended consequence of the program that we created was that I got to know so many more people in every area. I mean, I got to know some of the top. I mean, when you think, I had major cameramen did our shorts. People who became either they were just beginning and they became major cameramen or production designers. We brought in we had different casting directors. We used all the major casting directors in town because it was a nice give back.
Well, it's good for them too to meet new talent and stuff.
Well, they got to bring in talent.
Or they're bringing them in.
They got to bring in talent. They got to test talent because we didn't have any requirement that we had to have stars in these things. So we had just good people, good talent.
And they get to link up with a director who might one day enlist their services.
In every case, that is what happened.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a very high percentage of the people who made shorts for the program wound up going on to become television directors, feature directors, other things. I mean, they continued.
I think this is a really valuable lesson in this. And I think that in this day and age especially, but maybe also then, what you said earlier is really true. It's hard to make money with shorts when you just think of them as a short. Because you can't sell it. There's no market.
There wasn't any market.
And they've tried it with things like Quibi, and that went bankrupt in like 6 months. It doesn't really work.
I agree with you, but I think a lot of the reason it doesn't work is because I don't think the economics of Quibi was really very smart. Right. I mean, I don't know that they did what they could have done.
I agree.
I mean, there may be but
I think there's a better. We could. Believe me, we could take that conversation all the way. But I think
I'm knocking Jeff Katzenberger.
He's great, but no, everybody flubs a little bit, and I think. Personal opinion, they could have done a lot of things differently, and there was a lot of money they had access to, and I don't think it was used properly. But I'm also not their accountant, and I don't know what actually happened.
Me neither.
So the bottom line is, though, that what's important here, because shorts are like the most unfriendly to the budget to investors, but in a sense, you can't look at it as just this is a short film. How do I sell it to make money? There are so many other benefits that help you in your career, or for if you have a company maybe, or networking and meeting people, that the value of that thing is worth investing in if you want to do a great short. Take Vin Diesel, for example. He wasn't, the story goes, I don't know him personally, that he was not doing well with auditions because he's sort of an ambiguous looking guy. He doesn't fit quite into this or that demographic. He's not tall, not short, not big, not small. So he never got good roles until he made his own short, where he represented himself the way he wanted to be seen, and he could actually put on the screen, and now he invested in it. He did a good job with it. He put it in festivals, then suddenly gets noticed and he becomes Vin Diesel. You could say the same about, films like Saw or Sling Blade that start out with shorts, but they can also be used as proofs of concept or ways to find directors.
Now, I have to say, my initial interest was I was looking at the short as a form of art, not as I'm talking about me personally, my interest in it. And my partner probably was more commercially, she was really smart about all of the ways to find other ways to sell something that we had. But I was looking at it in the way that you look at a short story from a novel, the difference between a short story and a novel. A short story is unique. It fulfills a purpose, and it tells a whole story. And if you could do that in a short film, then that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't interested in making necessarily a piece that had to become something else. Didn't mean that in some cases, and I think even now, some of the shorts that we made could easily be expanded and turned into something bigger. But that wasn't the initial drive. Was to make something unique in and of itself. just as I said, like a writer will write a short story or write a number of stories before they ever tackle
But
a
I
novel.
think that's what I'm sort of, without saying it as
Mhm.
eloquently as you, I'm kind of saying that this is the thing. I'm very wired to look at a linear process with, okay, our return on investment, right? Like
Yeah.
just as,
Yes.
yeah, I come from a commercial advertising background and stuff. So
Mhm.
that all makes sense. But what I like here is that you set the intention of creating something good and unique, and you win 3
Yeah.
Academy Awards with these
Yeah.
things. You develop directors, you find writers, you bring in big people, you expand your network. All this is invaluable. If you only think about the immediate financial return, you're never going to do these things, and you're never going to benefit from those little things that you can't expect. So in a way, it's helping me and hopefully some other people out there to not look at everything as such an immediate return on investment. You know, a film is a story.
Look, a lot has changed since we did this because it's so much easier to do a short film today because the means have become easier. I mean, digital cinema has made it possible for literally anybody to make a film on your iPhone or on very inexpensive equipment. Whereas when we were doing these, we needed 35
That was a
millimeter
big deal.
film.
Yeah.
We needed major cameras. We needed major sound equipment. We needed large crews. I mean, in order
Now,
to
you kind
do
of
them
lucked
right.
out with the studio head being, because I don't know if somebody else would have maybe.
Well, he was a story guy. He understood, and he understood the value. This was David Putman. He understood the value of going from, making something that would be good in and of itself. In fact, he had done that in England. He had done a bunch of, I mean, he didn't make shorts, but he made relatively low budget, a series of very low budget films that might have been, I mean, low budget could have been $500,000 or $1 million. I mean, it was still a lot of money, but not anything like what the normal budget for films were. And he did a whole series of them for Channel 4 in England, and they were really good. Some of them were great, but they were films. They were full length films, mostly not more than 90 minutes, but good stories by really good directors, and a lot of those directors went on to do other things. So he understood the process that I was interested in, which was really finding a way to test the process a little bit, to make something good, and to also develop the careers of the people who made them. And the truth of it is, I have to say, I mean, I did this it ended for me in the early 90s, but I have to say for 10, 15 years after that, anytime I would walk around the city and I'd run into a movie set, I'd be walking on the set and someone come over and say, "Hey,
I worked
you're
with
Jonathan
you."
Saga. I did my first movie with you." I said, "Really?" I said, I didn't remember who they were necessarily, but they remembered that they had their first shot doing a short with my company and with me. And it was very gratifying because it was such a broad range of people in so many different categories. I mean, it still happens. I mean, I'm still finding people that I didn't even remember that I'd worked with who said, "Oh, and they've now become, major talents in the business." So, as I said, some of the cameramen and camera women actually that we work with are working all the time now and are very well known. So,
That's great.
it's pretty great.
To have such an impact on, or be a launch pad for somebody's career.
Well,
That's really
I mean, that was the unintended, and when I say unintended, I mean, it was, I was going to say the unintended benefit of the program, but it was, in some ways it was intended. We did want
But
to
you
do
didn't
that.
think it was.
We didn't
gonna
know
be
what
as-
it was going
as
to be.
impactful.
We didn't know how big it would become. In the first year, one of the shorts we made won the Academy Award for Best Live Action Short. Is a short called Ray's Male Heterosexual Dance Hall. It's a very simple concept, simple idea. And the idea of it was that in order to get ahead in business, you have to, men have to know, you've got to know the right people. And how do you meet the right people? You've got to go to the right place where the right people are. Well, Ray's Male Heterosexual Dance Hall was this place where you meet the right people. And you see a group of men, and you see the men, and they were all, real guys. I mean, it was definitely intended not to be not using heterosexual
It's not a sexual thing.
a negative or a positive thing. It was just that these were guys who, the same guys that you would see at a bar on Wall Street and any other place, but the guys would all be in the bar, and it was only men, and the music would play, and the men would dance with each other. And again, it was not a sexual thing at all. The idea of the game actually was to dance with the most powerful guy in the room. If you get to the most powerful guy in the room, maybe you'll get a job that'll raise your status, and you'll become more important as a result of it. So that was the idea of this, and it was done totally straight-faced. Everything about it was straight-faced, not intended. It wasn't gay. It wasn't. That wasn't the
Humorous
intention
or anything.
No. I mean, it was strictly. That was the nature of what it was, and it caught on. I mean, it was a clever idea.
Who came up with that idea?
The director and the guy who wrote it and directed it, and he was terrific. I mean, he went on to direct a number of films. He was a very good director and a wonderful writer. He was a comedy writer. Brian, Brian was the guy. I mean, that's his first name. Anyway,
was he an actor in it too, or
no? Brian was just a director, but he was really, really good. And we went on from that. We did a lot of other shorts. We did one in the second year of the program. We did one called Session Man, which also won the Academy Award for Best Live Action Short. And it was a really interesting idea too. I'll give you a quick rundown on it. The idea of it was about a rock group, a famous rock group that is recording a record in a recording studio. And it's the whole process of what that is. You see the group, and they're all working together, but they all have their tensions between them, and they're always, it's kind of like the Rolling Stones, as if Mick didn't get along with one of the other guys, whatever it was, Charlie Watson, whatever it was. And in the middle of this recording session, one of the guitarists gets in a fight with one of the other people in the group, and the rest of the group just ostracizes this guy and kicks him out. And the guy who's trying to produce the album is saying, "My God, this is a great guitarist. How can you?" He says, "We can't play with him anymore. He's an asshole. We don't want to do this." So they have to find somebody to play on the last few songs in order to fill out the album. And it's in the middle of the night. It's probably 1 a.m. And the guys in the booth are trying to figure out, who can we get? Well, we know this guy. He's a great session guy. And there are a lot of, if you know anything about musicians, there are session players who get paid just to do sessions. And they're some of the best musicians ever. They're amazing musicians. So they call this guy up, wake him up, tell him, "Hey, you want this gig? We have, you can get to play with the mighty Kings, And so he says, "Yeah, sure." And he gets his clothes on. His wife is sleeping. He gets up. He goes down to the studio. He gets there in time, and he starts to play with him. And he's great. And they can't believe how good he is. I mean, he's really, really good. And, they all realize they've lost this other guy who was one of their mainstays. It's like, again, it's like the Rolling Stones, losing one of their major performers, but they love this guy. This guy is really good. And halfway through the session, the other guys get together on a break, and they say, "This guy's really good. Why don't we ask him to join? We don't want that jerk back here anyway. So let's ask him to join the group. We're going on tour next week. We need somebody really good." And so they do. They ask the guy if he will participate and become part of the band. And this is his dream. His whole life, he's only wanted to be a great rock and roll guy in a major band. And yes, he's been making plenty of good money as a session player, but there's no personality to a session player. You have to fit in with any group you go to. Here's an opportunity for him to go with these guys and be part of the team. And he's really excited about it. And they ask him to think about it, and 10 minutes later he says, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." And they're all really excited. And by this time they've been playing all night, and it's just about dawn is coming up because these sessions go all night. And just as dawn is coming up, you see the guy who left, who was a real jerk, who was a real asshole, and he has left. And now he's coming back with his tail between his legs, and he's apologizing and, and everything else. And you see him, he says, he asks the guy who's the new player to step out for a second. He wants to talk to the guys. They don't really want to talk to him because they're still angry at him. And he comes in and he's very contrite, and he basically, and you don't see exactly what happens, but you realize this has probably happened before. And they all say, all right, you can come back.
Yeah.
And they go to the guy who is the session player, and they say, you did fantastic. We think you're amazing. But, we already, this is who the group is. We got to go back, thanks for, and so you see the whole trajectory of his whole life go before him, because he's, in one evening, he goes from being just a session player to being one of the mighty kings.
He wasn't.
And then
He was a mighty king for 5 minutes.
And then you see him going home at the end of the night,
Yeah.
and it's early in the morning, and his wife is getting up, and she's, and she says, how did it go? And he says, oh, it was great. It's like, it's just another session. And so it's beautifully done, and it's all one piece.
So I'm going to say we're not sure yet, but we're going to try to make these available somehow.
We can definitely make some of these available.
We'll put, if there
that
is.
was an Academy Award-winning film. That's won an Academy Award.
That's amazing. So if we figure this out, there'll be a link in the description or something that they can go see those. But to kind of summarize all this stuff, what do you think makes a good short?
Well, I think the same thing that makes a good short is what makes a good feature. You need a really interesting theme, something that and story that can be told economically. Obviously, that doesn't. It's usually a single event type thing. You can't, if you're going to develop something that is going to be multiple events, it probably lends itself more to a longer form than a short form. But the best shorts that I've seen usually are like great short stories.
Do you think they focus more on the character, or is it the event, or does it?
No. I think you have to have characters that are engaging and that you really want to deal with. You got to again,
because the example you just gave is great because it's an event, but there's an arc, and there's a beginning, middle, and end. And I think a lot of short films. Most short films, actually, and I have shorts in festivals all the time, and so I see other other shorts, and not to poo-poo on them, but it always feels like people tend to make shorts as a way to just kind of put some idea out there, but don't really think about the audience too much, and don't really adhere to any kind of real structure. And it's hard to put structure into a tiny little thing, but you still need to think about how people take in stories, right? So if it's just, hey, here's a bunch of people playing, and then they want to replace the guy, and then that's where it would have ended. That would have just been something that happened.
Yes.
But the fact that then the guy comes back and they're like, sorry, when you're thinking about it from the session musician's perspective, it makes it very exciting for a guy, and then like, oh, he got crushed, but was it bad? And that changes everything, just that little thing in the end.
And that was what made it work, because it is, you get the whole trajectory. You see in this one character, the excitement, what he normally does, then the excitement of the possibility, and then he's.
And I think that's something that, even if you're not a musician, that's something you can kind of relate to, because I think we've all sort of been in situations where we thought something great was going to happen, and it almost did, and then.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a guy who is a contemporary of mine, who is a music producer, very well known in the past. He's done platinum records. You wouldn't believe he was the producer for Carly Simon, for Barbra Streisand, for just so many people. His name is Richard.
Bunch of losers,
bunch of losers. Richard Perry, fantastic guy. And Richard and I went to high school together. And Richard and I he came out here and became a major music producer. It took me a lot longer, but I finally became a producer in film. We hadn't met, and I don't know, some years ago, we wound up meeting again and talking, and talking about stuff. And inevitably, the music producer wanted to be a film producer, and me, the film producer, I love music, so I wanted to get involved in music. Well, we wound up involved in a Broadway play that we did together, and that he was the head of. He kind of put together the music. I was producing it, and we became good friends. Along the way, we were talking about short films one day, and I mentioned Session Man, and he said, Session Man? And I said, yeah, there was a short film. He said, I know that short. So I said, well, I produced it. He says, you produced that short? I said, yeah, I produced it. He says, I show that short to everybody. He says, I love that short. And this was so surprising. I mean, he didn't know I produced it. He just knew it was a story about session men. And he obviously in his business, he knew more session men than you could imagine. And he just loved the concept of it because he'd worked with major bands and he'd seen those kind of things happen. So it was really kind of cool.
It's a nice little tie-in, and I get that with the Millennial Job Interview a lot. I had this video I made a long time ago. It went viral, and every once in a while, I don't know, it might not have been you, it might have been MJ or partner or somebody that also, once we got to know each other, and I sent the thing just to, as part of things that I've done, the response was, oh my gosh, I've seen this a million times. I love it. I share it with everybody. So I love it when that happens. And it's cool that even back then there wasn't a lot of now we have the internet. So when you have that thing has like 200 million views, there's like 14 million views just on YouTube alone. So obviously a lot of people see it and it gets shared easily. But how would that have happened back then? Was he giving people tapes or
no? I mean, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how he saw it, but he had seen it. I mean, I guess it might have been on YouTube because you can see it.
Oh, so this was later when YouTube already existed at this point.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I'm talking. Much later. This was in probably 2012 or 11 or something like that.
So way after you made
way
this
after.
Stuff.
We were working together. We hadn't seen each other in years. And he told me about this movie that I had made back in the 90s. And he said, wow, I love that.
That's fun.
So it was just, a surprise. But a lot of these short films really are terrific, and they don't have easy ways to see them. I mean, the idea of Quimby or whatever it was a good idea, I think, in the sense of aggregating some of these, good films. But because they're films that we made maybe 50 short films under half an hour.
Yours were longer than mine.
Yeah,
most were 20 minutes.
Were 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the reason that was because most of the people who made them wanted the most time they could get.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, we'll make it as long as it needs to be, and they wound up being 20, 25 minutes sometimes, but they had to be under a half an hour. And the interesting thing about all of these films was that we credited everybody who gave us something, and because we promoted so much, the credit list is almost longer than a film. I mean, there's so many people who gave stuff to the film, gave us craft service, gave us free film, gave us whatever, gave us the ability to use their studios for free or for very little money, all of those things.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And, to summarize, obviously, you just told us great little anecdotes can happen with shorts. Great things could come from them. Yeah. I've had great experiences. And if, you can do great things with shorts as a service,
I think you're right. I mean, I think everybody today has the ability, if they're clever, and, it's great for actors, and real actors have an opportunity to present their work in a way that you can't, it gives them an opportunity.
Filmmakers, writers, but also I've done documentary shorts, the history of Bazooka candy brands or Bazooka bubblegum. We did a thing for 15 minutes with Bazooka, and it just, the 75-year anniversary.
We even know Bazooka bubblegum.
Yeah.
I know it from
right, exactly. You can do it for a family legacy. And one thing that I noticed when this little thing went viral, and not just because of that, but I'd start getting inquiries from job placement agencies saying, hey, can you produce some shorts like this? Because, conventional training videos make people's eyes glaze over. And we want something to show where they can learn, but it's education, it's educational, but it's entertaining. So, good interaction, characters, something happening. Like, how not to conduct a job interview, right? Or how not to. So, those are other ways that you could find placement for shorts, or maybe make a little money on it, or something like that if you wanted to turn it into a more commercial concept. But I think you've just proven that doesn't have to be the goal, and great things can still happen.
I think really good things have happened often in those, and it's a form that actually has a value in and of itself.
And I think now more than ever, it's important to understand how to make good shorts, because everything's on social and YouTube, and people are scrolling. And if you can knock out a great 2-minute thing, 5-minute thing, 10-minute thing, you have the potential to have the largest audience ever, because the entire world is at your fingertips.
No doubt. And I'll tell you, it's even good in terms of what it teaches a filmmaker when you're making a short, because you got to learn how to do something economically. And the biggest question, the biggest criticism that I think most filmmakers face on making larger, feature films is, it's great, but couldn't it be a little tighter, a little shorter?
Yeah.
And, very often you just want to put everything out there.
That's true.
And if you're doing a short, you have to find ways to be economical and tight and still tell a good story.
That's true. I think we do get very attached as creatives to ideas that aren't, we have this thing where we say what's best for the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Apocalypse Now has like a 20-minute dinner scene that didn't make it into the movie. And I think it was Coppola's favorite thing.
No, it was a great scene.
Right.
Yeah, there were some very great scenes that are no longer, or that are on the cutting room floor, because they just weigh the film down, even as good as they may be.
Yeah.
They don't
move it forward.
They don't move it forward.
Yeah.
So you have to, you got to be very ruthless. And so one of the things, we've talked about this before, but it's one of the good reasons why when an editor, if you're your own editor, sometimes you fall in love with things. It's good to have an extra pair of eyes come in that didn't know how hard it was to get a particular shot. And says, hey, I don't care how
no value
it took you 2 days, but it doesn't. It's no good. Matter. It doesn't move the story along.
Yeah,
and that's somebody who may not, wasn't involved.
You might not like that person, but he's probably right. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, I think this was a good one.
This was good.
All right. Next time, chapter and verse. All right.
Okay, we got it.